Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I warmly welcome you, all of you who are joining us for this event of our section on the European affairs of the Association of the Hungarian Economists. Our discussion today will be about the priorities of the Swedish presidency. Those who are following us may recall that it's getting to be a tradition that we are inviting the ambassadors in Budapest who are representing the country which is presiding the Council of the European Union in the given semester. This semester is about Sweden, so I would like to very warmly welcome Ambassador Dag Hartelius, who is with us, and I will kindly ask him to say a few words about the presidency's priority, and then afterwards I will open the floor for questions and comments. Before getting there, Mr. Ambassador, if you would allow me, I would say a few words about you, a few words of introduction. Ambassador Hartelius has been working in Budapest since 2019, and he has been serving actually as Coreper 2 ambassador in Brussels, representing Sweden between 2011 and 2013. Before that, he was ambassador to Poland and also was ambassador of Sweden to Estonia. But he also was posted in other beautiful cities like Berlin, London, and St. Petersburg. So, Ambassador, we are eager to hear your presentation, your views, your introduction about the priorities what the Swedish presidency would like to achieve in this semester. Mr. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you for welcoming words. And it's a great honor to be here. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having invited me. I will say a few words about as you said, about the priorities of the Swedish presidency of the Council, and I will do my best then to answer your questions. I will talk for about 10 to 15 minutes, I think, and then the rest will be questions and answers. So we have resumed the presidency of the Council of the European Union at a time of historic challenges for member states and the Union as a whole. First of all, because Russia's illegal and unprovoked invasion of Ukraine is a threat to European security with dire consequences, as we know, for migration as well as for global food and energy supplies. Ukraine is fighting for its survival and for the security and lives of its citizens. The EU and its member states have rallied unprecedented support for Ukraine and will remain firmly by its side. European economies are severely affected by Russia's war. Rising inflation levels, interest rates, and energy prices have left companies and citizens struggling. Decisive and short-term action has been taken, and additional measures are being discussed. At the same time, we see it as imperative that we stay firm in our transition to the green economy and safeguard the basis of our economic model for long-term growth and competitiveness. Our unity and our readiness to act remain key to EU security, resilience, and prosperity. But first, 2 words on the role of the EU presidency, because for us, it's the third time after 2001 and 2009, and we can clearly see a difference before and after the Lisbon Treaty. That's obvious. And today, as we all know, the rotating presidencies operate in a much more stable and predictable environment connected to the 5-year legislature, the Commission work program, and solid cooperation between the presidency trios, and of course, also in trialogues with the European Parliament. This said, the outside world tends to change the plans of the European Union, especially over the last 3 years, starting with the Croatian presidency. The reality has required a lot of crisis management and sort of a new role for the presidencies. The pandemic, disturbances of supply chains and relate to Russia's attack on Ukraine, energy crisis and inflation have affected the agendas and the tasks of the presidencies. And as you know, Sweden is the last of in the trio, France, Czech Republic, and Sweden. But now I will, as we said, turn to the priority themes of our presidency. The first is security. The swift and decisive EU response to the invasion of Ukraine is a manifestation of our strength when we act together. The Swedish presidency is prioritizing continued economic and military support for Ukraine, as well as support for Ukraine's path towards the European Union. This is requiring further efforts at both national and EU level. Further steps are needed for reconstruction and reform towards EU integration. There are huge needs in and for Ukraine, and it will be crucial to maintain unity and a long-term perspective. We also need to develop cooperation based on the new G7 donor coordination platform. Other issues related to Ukraine will be a need to extend temporary protection for refugees, continue work on accountability for war crimes, and on the use of frozen Russian assets for the reconstruction of Ukraine. The summit with Ukraine, as we know, was held on 3rd of February, and President Zelensky attended the extra European Council on 9th of February. As to the EU perspective for Ukraine, the Commission will report back to the Council in sometime later this spring. But to strengthen the security of our Union and its citizens, we also must build consensus towards a robust European security and defense policy in close cooperation with partners. Further steps will build on our common action to counter Russia's aggression towards Ukraine, as well as the implementation of Strategic Compass and other initiatives, for instance, in the field of hybrid resilience. As to the Strategic Compass, we expect conclusions on implementation of about 80 measures to be discussed at the Foreign and Defense Ministers' Joint Foreign Affairs Council on 20th of March, in a few days, the so-called Jumbo meeting. We also expect the adoption of a framework for crisis management approach and other support measures in relation to Moldova. And in January, we had eventually the joint EU-NATO declaration, which was also an important step. As to defense capabilities, there's hope for that the Short-Term Procurement Act, EDIRPA, will be finalized in trilogues with the European Parliament this spring, and the cyber defense package will hopefully be agreed upon in May or June. The second priority is resilience, and if I speak personally, I think had it not been because of Russia's attack on Ukraine, I guess this would have been our first priority. But and it has to do with the long-term economic challenges for Europe. Because to keep economic growth, we need to meet these long-term challenges. And by definition, resilience requires the long-term perspective. Europe's strength, resilience, and global standing depend on our economic output. This is closely linked to the single market and global trade opportunities. European actors profit from operating the largest single market in the world, which, by the way, and I'm sure you are aware of this, celebrates its 30th anniversary this year. So the EU must continue to provide the best possible conditions for a sound and open economy based on free competition, private investment, and successful digitalization. During the pandemic, as we remember, a discussion on supply chain and supply security started. We learned about the dependencies, for instance, on semiconductors and on China, discussions that are still ongoing. We also found the new expression friendshoring to develop cooperation and interdependencies with partners that are also good friends and allies, and where it's easy for our companies to operate. It's crucial to secure strategic supplies without moving towards protectionism. The more open the economy of a member state is, the more important is this aspect. Recently, the Council started looking at the US Inflation Reduction Act, and the Commission came back to the Council before the extra European Council on 9th, 10th February. And Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, as we know, visited the United States just a few days ago, and she will report back to European Council next week from her trip and a dialogue with the US administration. As we know, There are discussions also going on increasing the flexibility of state aid rules. I think that for the sake of safeguarding a well-functioning single market, any relaxation will have to be limited in time and narrow in scope. An updated single market strategy proposal and additional proposals related to addressing the short and long-term challenges will be discussed at the Spring Council, European Council next week. It's based not least on the earlier findings from 2020 of the European Commission about existing remaining barriers within the single market, not least in the field of services. A reform of economic governance is underway, departing from the Commission proposal of 9th of November last year and aiming at sustainable public finances. Our hope is to reach a general approach, a political agreement with the legislative discussions to follow under the Spanish presidency. And a number of external trade discussions are expected, for instance, on China, and there will be continued talks with Australia and follow up with some other countries such as Mexico and Chile. The third priority is prosperity. In periods of industrial and technological transition, those who move and act early have a competitive edge. European companies and industries are already leading the transition. Joint European steps towards independence from fossil fuels are necessary not only for the green transition, but for our security. European companies that provide green solutions will be in high global demand and can help drive the transition towards a circular economy. The transition to a resource-efficient fossil fuel future will require major investments in innovative industries that can translate the best ideas and innovations into functional solutions. We need to provide the right regulatory framework and policies to attract these investments. Many Fit for 55 elements are in the final phase for the Council: transportation, telecom, artificial intelligence, data legislation, cyber, energy market reform, and others. Also on the environmental side, there's hope to finalize issues related to the green transition and circular economy. The European Union is based on democratic values, paving the way for cohesion, individual freedoms, non-discrimination, increased economic output, and global influence. Upholding the principle of the rule of law and fundamental rights is therefore an essential element of the Swedish and indeed every presidency of the Council. So this is our fourth priority. The country-specific rule of law dialogue, 5 member states per semester, will continue with remaining member states from the first round and the first of the second round at the General Affairs Council next week. All of us know well the work of the conditionality mechanism, which is ongoing and is expected to return to the ECOFIN Council at some point later this spring. We also expect Article 7 for Hungary and Poland to be on the agenda of the General Affairs Council in May. The proposal for a Media Freedom Act, introduced by the Commission on 22nd of September last year, covers a number of important and topical areas, and we would hope to agree among member states on a general approach that there's a political agreement sometime in May. Thank you. That was my brief introduction on our priorities, and I'll be more than happy and willing to answer questions. If I will be able, you will have to see.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you very much for this very concise and very to-the-point presentation. Actually, I think the priorities of the presidency, so the security, unity, competitiveness, green and energy translation, and democratic values, all of these are, I think, very well designed for the actual challenges which are in front of the Union. Dear colleagues, there are 2 ways of putting questions. One of them is to use the chat function of WebEx, where we have already a question or raise your hand. I will go in the order of appearance. The first question was put on the chat. Then I will give the floor to Böröcs Lajos, because he is also raising his hands. So let's start with the question that we received in the chat. I don't know whether, Mr. Ambassador, you see the question. Anyway, I will read out because not all of the colleagues might see it, and I think it's maybe good also to hear the question. The question is coming from our office, from our General Secretary, has put the following questions. There is a big issue on the table. He says the sustainability of the EU fiscal rules. So I mean the governance of the Stability and the Growth Pact. The Climate Action Network Europe and other organizations have put forward concrete proposals on how the reform of the European fiscal governance could incorporate the EU climate commitments. So how, when we review the governance of the Stability Pact, how the climate commitments can be taken into account. The question says that there is a growing consensus that the framework based on fiscal and monetary conservatism needs reform. However, rethinking of EU policies monitoring and evaluation criteria cannot be based only on narrow economic considerations, but must also take into account environmental and sustainability aspects. So the question refers to the dilemma that we need to keep the discipline for our fiscal rules, but also there is a new challenge, the climate commitments. And somehow we have to address this dilemma. So the question is, what are the expectations in this respect from the Swedish presidency?
Well, the work on economic governance, of course, departs from the Commission communication from 9th November of last year. And this is the framework for discussions. And right now there's work going on council conclusions on economic governance that we hope to get agreement about now before and at the Spring Council. I think that's our target for now, to reach an agreement on those, and that's solidly based on the Commission proposal and the work that's been discussions that being held in the Council since then. Then I tend to believe, and I think that's not only me, that later on when we get to the legislative part, it will be difficult discussions because we're talking about fiscal sustainability, and I'm sure there will be other proposals and suggestions than those that are currently in the Commission communication that will come up. But seen from a narrow presidency perspective, this is our aim is to try to navigate the first set of conclusions so that we have this general approach and political agreement as the foundation for upcoming work on the legislative side, which we understand will be extremely difficult because there are sensitivities here, how to monitor and work with public debt and other criteria, and how to set this criteria, and what should be the role of the European Commission, and so on. So that's as much as I can say for now when it comes to additional perspectives on financial sustainability. I'm sure they will come up in the debate, but for now, this is what we're aiming at, and we find it difficult enough to deal with.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. May I ask my colleagues to introduce shortly themselves? First, I would give the floor to Lajos Böröc. Lajos, please, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Lajos Böröc, Secretary General of the Hungarian Hospitality Association. I would have three short questions. The first of is that this year is also a European Year of Skills. If you are familiar with some Swedish initiatives for this skills area in the European Union. The second one would be that recently there was this big ship accident on the southeast close to Italy, and you have started your preparatory discussion with the migration issue. if you see some practical solution how to handle this masses that are pushed somehow from Africa, and then how to share the burden between the southern, northern, and other European countries. And the third one would be if you had some feedback from our one-party delegation from your parliament from the last week. Thank you.
Okay. Well, concerning the first question on skills, I have to admit I'm not in a very good position to say so much, because I simply am not. I don't have the information and the background on the migration topic, which indeed is extremely topical during this semester, as it has been in the past as well. But now it's been on the agenda, not least in the extra European Council on the 9th of February. It will definitely come back to the European Council now next week in some way, because of the current situation. And of course, now we have also partially different history compared to more than a year ago, because we also had the influx of a couple of millions Ukrainians to Europe. That's setting the agenda. And as I was saying, we have some urgent measures to be taken in relation to that when it comes to the directive that has to be renewed. Also with the ongoing development in the south. I think right now we have two things on the agenda, on the migration policy agenda. One is, of course, the pact, which we've been working almost since the beginning of this legislature, since 2019, 2020, where the council has been slowly but steadily been moving forward of the various elements. It's, as we all know, a very tricky agenda, but I think we are fairly confident that we are moving towards some kind of conclusion of the pact, not during the Swedish presidency, but maybe in the beginning of next year, which we hope. But then again, there are short-term issues right now that the council is discussing. Of course, partially because of the developments, not only with relation to Ukraine, but also in the south, in Greece, Italy, but also through the Balkan routes. And a lot of focus right now is on not least short-term measures, but also external measures, external border measures, and support to countries of origin. I think that's the focus right now where we're going, and also issues of possible financial support for some of these infrastructural measures. I think that's where we're going. We'll see how much it will. It was discussed at the Justice and Home Affairs Council last week. I'm sure it will be touched upon at the European Council next week. Still, I feel that there's a strong joint wish of the member states and also the Commission to move forward on these agendas, and it doesn't seem to be impossible to reach concrete improvements there. As to the visit by Hungarian parliamentarians to Sweden last week, which I think was your third question, I mean, this is not a European Union presidency topic, but I think the feedback that we had from both from the media coverage in Sweden, from the meetings between Swedish and Hungarian MPs and MEPs, and also when I made a presentation of the Swedish presidency priorities to the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Hungarian Parliament on Monday this week. The feedback was a very positive. The Hungarian delegation was very satisfied with the outcome of the visit. So it seems everyone was happy after this visit.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I see, dear colleagues, that it's a great opportunity to talk to our guest about wider issues than the presidency's priorities. I will appreciate if you remain on the area of the competencies of the presidency, as this was the subject of the invitation of the ambassador. László, please. László Vajda.
Thank you, Gábor. I am following now this conference in a double way from my screen and from my mobile. Still, I hope you can hear me. If yes, thank you. Mr. Ambassador, I had two questions. One is related to the enlargement, because enlargement negotiations with the Western Balkan countries have started in the past years with many of these countries, but negotiations are forwarding very slowly. Is there any initiative on the agenda of the Swedish embassy to speed up these negotiations? The second question relates to the common agricultural policy, which just started to be implemented in 2023. Still, the common agricultural policy has many, many aspects, not only those which are now covered by the national strategic plans. So my question is whether from the different aspects of the common agricultural policy, whether is any legislation on the agenda of the Swedish presidency, let it be in any stage of the decision-making process. So any veterinary, phytosanitary issue or food safety issue. So the second question relates to the common agricultural policy. The first question to the enlargement on the Western Balkan countries. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think I can address the first question more in substance. The second question, I am at a bit of a loss because I don't master all the details of the agenda of Coreper 1 and the CAP. But I start with the first question. And indeed, enlargement is also to the Western Balkans is important, and I think it has not become less important against the background of development in Ukraine and the fact that the EU has given Ukraine a candidate status as well as Moldova. So of course that highlights also the importance of the Union moving forward on the Western Balkans agenda in order not to create any feeling that they're being forgotten about. I mean, now we have made progress recently in at least on some decisions when it comes to North Macedonia and Albania, of course. And most recently also in December when Bosnia and Herzegovina received this candidate status. The question is now what is there to do concretely to move forward? When it comes to North Macedonia and Albania, work is ongoing, and I think one would expect or one would hope that there will be intergovernmental conferences later this year, not during the spring, but maybe sometime in November. I think for Albania that's a given. For North Macedonia, then, as you know, there's some political challenges both inside and not least with relation to some member states also there, how to move forward. Then of course we have Serbia, where we also would like to move forward. There we have ongoing discussions with them. There are issues concerning the alignment of common foreign and security policy. There are questions of alignment of visa policy where we've seen some developments, and of course this will be extremely important. We have an application from Kosovo concerning candidate status. I don't think that will be processed in the next few days. There are discussions also with Montenegro, where we have a difficult domestic situation now with regard to the Constitutional Court and the upcoming elections. So what I'm saying is that yes, there's a strong wish to move forward. I think some of these issues will be then creating results in the autumn, although work is ongoing in a very steady pace. In some of the Western Balkan countries, the local situation, say in Bosnia-Herzegovina, say in when it comes to Serbia and Kosovo, say in Montenegro, also creating some challenges for us and for the international community also to deal with. But the wish is there, and I think there's quite a strong commitment on behalf not only of the presidency but also on a big part of the member states to really to move forward here for a number of reasons. And I think my conclusion is that Ukraine is not slowing down the process in Western Balkans. I would even go as far as to argue it has given some additional energy and impetus to the process there. But of course, there are a couple of challenges. As I hinted at, when it comes to details on the single legislative elements that are on the agenda, because it's not part for the common agriculture policy, as it's not part of the priorities, and I'm dealing now mainly with the priorities. And I have to confess, I'm not into the details there where we are. That's something I would then have to check and dig into to find out whether there are any issues on the Coreper 1 agenda and the Agriculture Council agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. If I may help, as I'm dealing with the Coreper 1 dossier, so I see a bit the agenda. Actually, there is no major initiative concerning the reform of the agriculture policy that I think it's now. I think it will come to in a moment when we start discussing the next MFF. There are a few issues on the agenda, but not necessarily legislative proposals. The market situation in Europe, the agriculture market situation, is discussed at every month, at every event of the agricultural, at the meeting of the agriculture ministers, mainly due to the situation in Ukraine. So that's a point that we always discuss. All this not legislative proposals. Some legislative proposals are also on the table and making progress, like the geographical indications or the plant health law or natural restoration law. But the core CAP, the core common agriculture policy regulations, I think are not on the table. That's why they're not appearing amongst the priorities of the presidency, although there are some works done in wider sense in agriculture. Dear colleagues, I also have some written question. If I don't see a hand raised, Mr. Ambassador, may I read out another question about security? Many prime ministers and politicians are raising the issue of the importance of the military cooperation in Europe. You see, Mr. Ambassador, that's an association of economists, but the interest is quite wide regarding the priorities of the Swedish presidency. So the issue of military cooperation in Europe is addressed, and there are proposals maybe to strengthen it. And the question is how you see this issue, this need to closer cooperation in security and particularly military issues in Europe.
Well, I think it's a very relevant and very topical question because of and it ties well into our first priority of security. And as I was saying, the first part of this first priority is dealing with Ukraine. Sorry, I just have to. But is dealing with Ukraine, but the long-term. Sorry. Can I call back? Can I call back? Yeah, thank you. The long-term issue is of course dealing with the security, our own European security elements, which is not only civilian defense and not only crisis management, but various elements on the hybrid side, on cyber defense, but also military cooperation. I think we've been practicing over the last year some cooperation when it comes to procurement. We have the European Defence Fund, which has been added to. We're right now discussing also joint or parallel procurement of ammunition. These are things on the agenda of the European Union. And of course, there are a number of proposals when it comes to procurement that are there. I mentioned the EDIRPA, the short-term procurement proposal by the Commission, and there was also other for long-term procurement cooperation. So I think this is ongoing. I think that some of these are slowly moving through the European Parliament, so we're partially waiting for the European Parliament here. But procurement is the obvious area where we are making the cooperation closer and more intense. I think when it comes to sort of military operational planning, we have, of course, been doing things over the years when it comes to battle groups and other elements. But I think in the current situation with the war in Ukraine, I think it's become also very obvious how important are the transatlantic links when it comes to security, not least. So I think if you would ask me, is there any push for a European army or any sort of strictly European military cooperation limited only to the European Union right now? I would say not really right now, because of the current serious security situation. This said, however, with the and of course we have also had this joint EU-NATO declaration in the beginning of the year, which forges the cooperation between the two parts, and where the European Union has its strength, not least in the civilian field, not least when it comes to cyber and hybrid issues. But I think with the kind of cooperation that's now being discussed, not only with the strategic compass, but also the very concrete things related to military procurement, that forges us closer and closer together, not least in the field of defense industry, procurement, armaments, and all that. And then in the long term, that gives the foundation also for a closer, more structured military cooperation inside the European Union.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. If you allow me, I would read out another question. There are questions coming, which I think is a good news. So there is quite an interest about your presidency. The next question is, I think it's about a bit about your future legacy, because the next question is referring to the next trio, the Spanish, Belgian, Hungarian trio, which will succeed the current trio, where Sweden is the last member. And the question relates, how do you see what will be the tasks for the next trio? What would be the dossiers or your legacy? What the next trio very likely will have to handle and take over?
Well, I would first start looking at the 5-year legislature. I mean, we're approaching the end of this legislature. So Spain and Belgium will be the last ones of the current legislature. Hungary will be the first presidency of the next after the European elections. And that, of course, affects the presidency a lot. I think if we are to some extent being absorbed by trilogues with the European Parliament, that will even more be the case for Spain and Belgium. So that's one part. Whereas in the case of the Hungarian presidency, we don't know how far we have come when it comes to finalizing the composition of the commission and whatnot. So there are a number of institutional issues there, and for them then to agree on a work program. So I think for any presidency being the first in a 5-year legislature, the air will be a bit thin because there will be not so much to work on the one hand, when it comes to these predictable 5-year programs. On the other hand, I tend to believe that even if we will have come through the pandemic, I think whatever happens in the war in Ukraine, there will be a legacy there to work on, and that I think to a large extent will be impacting the agenda both for the presidency and for the work of the council. We'll have all the long-term challenges of the reconstruction of Ukraine. We have all the other tricky issues related to war crimes and to assets. There will be, of course, issues relating to the budget of the European Union and the long-term budget. I think these issues will not surface during the Swedish presidency, but I'm sure they will come. They will come. There will be a review moment, as is the provision of the MFF agreement, and then we will enter into very difficult discussions as well. And I wouldn't be surprised if they would were to spill over on maybe even all the members of the upcoming trio. So I think there will be trilogues and finalizing agreements and continued crisis management, and a big question mark as to the long-term budget. We all understand that the European Commission will say for good reasons that there are a number of things that the European Union is committing itself to now that are not funded, and we need to review the budget for additional funds or for reprioritizing. And these discussions are, as we know, always extremely difficult.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Actually, that would have been my question, whether how you see the long-term budget, the multi-annual financial framework. So you also expect that this issue will come for the next trio. I also think so. We will see how big is the appetite of the member states to revise. We know that the Parliament always has a bit bigger appetite to revise. It means enlarge the budget or spending more, and we know that now there are no margins practically in the budget. So there will be quite a difficult situation for the second half of the MFF. We will see. Actually, I think it will be an interesting debate, but probably beyond your presidency.
Yeah.
Mr. Ambassador, also, if I may raise another issue, if you allow me also to ask a question. We have seen the initiative of the United States about the Inflation Reduction Act, which is providing massive financing in favor of technological investment, green investment. And it seems that there is a kind of race between the two sides of the Atlantic who can give more incentives to their own industry. We have seen the CHIP Act proposal, the net zero industrial proposal of the Commission. How you see this situation? What we can do? You mentioned that resilience would have been maybe the first opportunity if the geopolitical situation is different, and I also agree that this is quite a substantial issue for our future. How you see this situation? What we can do? How can we promote the technological investment, green investments, particularly having this little competition from the other side of the Atlantic. I'm not speaking also about China, who is also heavily subsidizing similar industry investments. Thank you.
Yeah. No, and when it comes to the IRA and the perceived competition from the US in this matter, I think, as I mentioned, there will be a report back from Ursula von der Leyen to the European Council next week from her trip. My impression is that she had some good conversation, and there's some mutual understanding on how we can rather work together than directly compete on this. But of course, it's perceived as a challenge and maybe a wake-up call for some parts as well, how we could do it. I think our the key position from the presidency is that we have to think long term, and not get too easily dragged down by short-term actions that could actually lead us into protectionism and weaken the single market. So if there is, and we know there were we have some discussions that were raised during the post-pandemic or the pandemic situation as well with regard to supply chain, and it's very easy to trigger some protectionist reflexes here and there. Right now, the one discussion is about increasing flexibility for state aid rules, but as I said, they would have to be very limited in time and very narrow in scope, so that we don't undermine the single market. And I think basically the reform of the single market is one important step here. If you look at the reports from the Commission on barriers for the single market, they reported, I think it was 2020, but not so long ago, that about 60% of the barriers that were identified some 20 years ago are still there in power. So if we can deal with them, and that can be in the field of services, a tough agenda for some member states, but I think if we can deal with them, if we can strengthen and deepen the single market, because there is quite a lot more to do there, that's a way of enhancing the competitiveness for European companies and for Europe as a whole. But also to deal with if we are looking at investment support and whatever we're doing, trying to promote the high skilled areas, the greening technologies and digitalization. I think that's the way of approaching this, because if you look back over the last few years, Europe has lost competitiveness in comparison to both the United States and to Asia. And that's where we have to deal with. And the way ahead, if we want to really secure our prosperity, is not by increasing protectionism, but really to do our homework when it comes to competitiveness. And as we do have this, I would say, wonderful single market that gives so good opportunities for efficiency and for large scale operation, then that's the most important way forward to go here.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. It sounds very reasonable. It's a lot of homework yet to do in that sense. I see a question from Zsolt Becsey, who is the vice president of our section. I would like to give the floor, Zsolt, to you, please. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. Okay, thank you. Your Excellency, my question could have been, and I see that there is a related questions to this, very pragmatic, namely the enlargement of two zones, the Eurozone and the Schengen zone. Because in both cases, we have started a further enlargement last year, but we couldn't finish it. And as I heard from the news, Bulgaria reported maybe to the presidency that they are not in the position to ask for suspending or eliminating the derogation related to their entry into the Eurozone. But also with Romania and Bulgaria on the Schengen zone, we remained, or I think the majority of the states remained after the accession of Croatia, that they will be examined in the future. My question is that how do you see these ongoing processes? And also there was another question, but it's a general question about the Maastricht criteria and the obligation to join the Eurozone, but I could see that it's the next person who proposed it. So I would remain in the pragmatical side, that how the Swedish presidency could see the present withdrawal of the Bulgarian request, whether they will do it later, was it something in the background, have you heard something about this? And about the ongoing discussion on the Schengen accession of Romania and Bulgaria.
Yeah, on the Euro issue, I have no additional information. On the Schengen issue, we all know that this is in the hands for Romania and Bulgaria. As we know, one country was admitted. Croatia and Bulgaria and Romania are still waiting, and that's despite the recommendation from the European Commission after the evaluation. And that's now in the hands of 2 member states. I have no idea how fast this could do, how long it could take, but that's where we are. And I wouldn't dare to prejudge to say if it could happen during our presidency or if it will last longer.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ambassador. There is also another question a bit related to the euro area. The question relates that all the countries who acceded the union took their commitment to adopt the euro. So we have all the obligation to adopt the euro. Some member states are more advanced, like Croatia has just joined, Bulgaria is on its way. Some other member states are not yet in the way. The question is what the presidency could do to help this process. It's a bit tricky question, I admit. Can you hear me, Mr. Ambassador? No? Actually, I haven't. I saw that you were speaking, but I didn't hear you either. I wonder whether other colleagues are hearing me. I try to find where is the issue.
Yes, we can hear you, but we can't hear Mr. Ambassador.
Oh, okay. Is Mr. Ambassador muted?
No.
No? Then we cannot hear anything. Miklos, could you help us?
Not really.
Mm-hmm.
Not really. Maybe it would be great if Mr. Ambassador checks out and check in again. Maybe it could help to solve the problem.
Okay, then I will ask. I will call him. Maybe that's the.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't know what could be the problem.
So, Mr. Ambassador, we all can hear each other except you, and I understand that you don't hear us. So there might be an issue at your end because we hear all each other. My colleague is saying that maybe if you would switch off and switch on again, join out and join in, this might help. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry for this. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hát, ha ez megoldja, nem tudom,
Hát ez
hogy
segít, igen. Igen.
a probléma, mert látszólag be volt kapcsolva a mikrofonja is, tehát hogy
Igen, nem tudom, hogy mi történhetett.
mert itt egymást meg tökéletesen halljuk, úgyhogy
Igen, úgy látom, hogy mindenki hall bennünket, vagy legalábbis nem láttam ellenkező jelzést.
Igen, hallható, úgyhogy itt hallgatóként hallunk mindent.
Ugye, igen, köszönöm szépen.
megjött nagykövet úr.
Igen.
Igen, most le van némítva.
Okay, Mr. Ambassador, can you hear us?
Yes, I
Yes,
can.
now and we can hear you. Excellent. Thank you very much for this, and I'm sorry for this little technical hiccup. So we had a question. It's a bit tricky, but why not? I mean, related to the euro area, there are member states who are more ambitious in meeting the criteria, and there are member states who are a bit lagging behind. Although all of us have the, with a few exceptions, like Denmark, all of us, we have the obligation to join. How you see it? Can the presidency help or promote the process of meeting the criteria for joining the EU, or it's a bit beyond what you can do?
Yeah, I mean, we do have a number of non-euro countries. My own and the presidency country is one of those, and some who are having a quite ambitious agenda to meet the criteria and to join as soon as possible, and others who you could maybe even claim already fulfill the criteria in practice, but who do not have the ambition to join right now. No, the short answer is no. We wouldn't see this as a presidency task. So that's I can only say for my own country that the public support for, we had a referendum in 2003, as you may recall, and it was for different reasons we didn't get the majority for joining, and the public support has been quite limited, and there's no one putting it on the agenda. And of course, then we see other countries, as was mentioned earlier, Bulgaria, Romania, who have a high ambition there. Croatia just joined. But no, it's not a presidency issue.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I have one more question about another aspect of sustainability, and namely the labor market and demographic sustainability. And the question relates to the issue that in many member states, quite a large number of workforce is missing. We see here a statistics that according to the Hungarian Minister of Economy, 500,000 people is missing from the Hungarian labor market. There is a similar situation in the UK and Germany. But UK is relevant as a market economy, maybe not as a member state, but still a relevant example. And the question relates how you see this situation in Sweden, or I would say how you see from the presidency's perspective, can we do anything to improve that situation, filling up the gap in the labor markets?
On the one hand, of course, we are entering territory that I think most member states would, to a large extent, claim these are member state prerogative and not an area for common decision making. On the one hand, and I think there are different challenges in different member states of where you have both a demand for more labor force, especially skilled labor, and at the same time you have unemployment, and how to marry these two elements. But I think what we can do and now we have seen also with the influx of Ukrainians into the European labor market, we've seen in some member states they are very high in demand because of their skills and so on. But I think what we can do as a union is of course, to facilitate many of the preconditions. We talked about the single market, for instance. Some of the barriers that the European Commission has identified actually limits the mobility of labor inside the European Union, because you have various sort of member state related barriers that would make it difficult for skilled laborers in one area to move from one member state to another and meet these needs, for instance, and also to increase the competitiveness. So I think it's basically in those areas where we can do, as a union, can do something. And I would once again, I may sound a bit repetitive, but I would once again start by the need for us to address the long-term challenges, to work hard, to do our homework in the single market. And I think that will also have an impact on areas that are, I think, by most regarded as member state competence, but still a challenge to member states.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Ambassador, there is another question. It seems that you are quite active. This relates to strategic investments, and the battery factories are one of these examples, which are quite debated in few member states, including Hungary. And actually, our information is that battery factories are operating without problems in Sweden and in other member states. How do you see this this kind of investment, particularly from the point of view that some of these investments are made by Chinese funding, so practically Chinese companies are investing in Europe in this industry?
Well, I wouldn't want to dive too deeply into a contested question in the country where I serve. But of course, there are a couple of elements here. The last thing you mentioned was China and Chinese investments. That's as I said in my introduction, the dependency on China is something that we are discussing in the Union. We started already a few years back when it comes to investments from China, and also security-related issues, for instance, in the telecommunications areas. And so this is an ongoing discussion when it comes to the Chinese elements, and that's I think we've been moving forward over the last few years on that, and I think that discussion will continue. Then, of course, there are elements for the modernization and digitalization and the greening of the European economy, and that kind of strategic investments in those areas that I think are very important if we want to reach a fossil-free environment, as we've said in the European Union we aim at. Now we have discussion on combustion engines again, and we'll see what will happen to that one. But of course, we need to invest a lot in facilitating e-mobility in the future. That goes with electric cars, and the preconditions for electric cars, be it sort of the loading charging poles, and to have a distribution. I'm representing a country that's pretty large with long distances, and where these charging poles is a real challenge to deal with. And of course, battery production, and to have this. So these are important elements as such, and I think we will, as a union, this is part of our solution for a sustainable future, and for the greening, and for the prosperity that was talking about. But as I said, I wouldn't want to dig into specific investment in one specific battery factory, one specific city.
Sure, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. My question related rather to the strategic industries in Europe, not about the current debate in Hungary. That falls beyond the subject of our discussion indeed. I have one more question, might be the last one, but still I think there is an interesting question about the minimum wage system. If I'm not wrong, the Council and the Parliament agreed on the minimum wage directive at last October or November, and it will be implemented, I think, in 2 or 3 years. How you see this is not necessarily now on your agenda, on the agenda of your presidency, because it have been agreed, but maybe how you see the impact of this minimum wage agreement in Europe.
Well, I almost have to, I think, take on my rather Swedish hat here, because when this issue came up, you may recall there's been also a discussion as to whether this is community legislation and how much is the member states' prerogative, and we eventually managed to reach an agreement. I'm not the master of the details there, but just to say that from our perspective, and member states have different solutions here. Not every member state work with the minimum wages. For instance, in the Swedish case, we have a long tradition of agreements between the parties of the labor market, the employers and the employees and the trade unions, and it's a politically extremely sensitive thing for if the government were to get involved in these matters. But I think in general, the system with ours works in general in a similar way, because it creates a floor for salaries, and it creates a ceiling. But to have it regulated too strictly from a community perspective is politically extremely difficult, and I think that's been the case for a country like Hungary as well, for slightly but not completely different reasons. But I think it's good that we have this agreement and on the directive, and that we can move forward, and that we can move forward in a way that gives the necessary flexibility because of to member states, because of different rules and regulations. Now I lost you again.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Now it was my mistake.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. We still have interest about the Swedish presidency. May I give the floor to the member of our presidency of our EU section, Orsolya Szijjártó. Orsolya, please, the floor is yours.
Hello, yes. Köszönöm, Gábor. Thank you, Gábor. Hello, Mr. Ambassador. Yes, my question would be related to employment and education. I have read in your program that you are going to initiate a discussion on how green energy skills can be acquired by businesses and individuals. And I would like to ask you, what kind of discussion forum will that be? How will individuals and businesses be involved in this discussion? Thank you.
Oh, I'm afraid you got me there. It's a good question. I should know, but I don't. I actually don't know exactly what kind of proposals there are. So I have to pass. Feel free to reach out to me and for me to check.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Indeed, we cannot expect the ambassador to be familiar with all the proposals on the
program. Of course. Yeah.
But I think it's a good point what Orsolya raised, that I think it's quite a positive element of your program, because without skilled labor force or without a proper education in that regard would of course hinder the competitiveness of the European economy. So I think it's a very good proposal, and we're happy to see in your program. Mr. Ambassador, I think we are getting to the end of we have got to the end of our questions. And if I don't see any other hand, but I do not see now, maybe we went a bit beyond 1 hour. I hope you don't mind. I think it was a quite good interest about your presidency's program. So, Mr. Ambassador, many thanks. Many thanks for having joined us and sharing with us your views and the priorities of the Swedish presidency. And let me wish you every success for your presidency. It's a very challenging period, but I'm quite sure that having very good memories of the previous Swedish presidency, that time we learned a lot from the Swedish presidency. We were preparing for our first Hungarian presidency. So having very good memories, I'm sure that your administration and your political masters are very well prepared to deliver on these priorities. So, Mr. Ambassador, many thanks again.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for very good questions and challenging questions also. Thank you for your interest.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Dear colleagues, many thanks for having joined us. I now close the session, and I hope you see you, dear colleagues, at our next event, which will be held in early April, about the extension of the EU and Schengen area. It will be a physical session, so not by video conferencing, but I hope that we will see many of you in a room when we can shake hands. Ambassador, again, many thanks, and now I close the session.